Have you ever wondered why the Brown family seemed to unravel the moment real leadership, not showmanship, was required? Christine's memoir offers an explanation that's so obvious it almost feels like a reminder rather than a revelation. According to her, Kody Brown is not, and never has been, a deep independent thinker. Instead, he tends to absorb the beliefs and attitudes of whoever spoke to him most recently, like a sponge soaking up whatever puddle it lands in. One early example is almost charming in its simplicity. A friend of his observed Jewish holidays, and suddenly Kody did too. The message is clear. Introduce an identity, any identity, and Kody will happily try it on. No instructions needed. When you look at it that way, Robyn's long-standing claim that she can speak Kody makes perfect sense. It's never sounded like a romantic bond so much as a confession of fluency. She understands how he works. Viewers have seen her correct his sentences, finish his thoughts, and, according to Christine, quietly steer major family decisions when the cameras weren't around. During the COVID era, that dynamic wasn't subtle, it was on full display. Christine's words may sting Kody's pride, but they simply put into writing what many people noticed years ago. Kody's habit of adopting the personality and values of whoever he finds impressive has a long and sometimes unintentionally funny history. Take the infamous refusal to attend a Hawaiian roast pig barbecue. It was framed as a matter of personal conviction, when it looked far more like plain old rudeness. Or consider the family mission statement, seemingly borrowed from another plural family, and blown up to such dramatic proportions that entire walls were devoted to displaying it. The seriousness of it all bordered on parody. It's not hard to understand why the older Brown children keep their distance. Public association can come with the social risk of secondhand embarrassment. Just imagine a casual neighborhood gathering suddenly overtaken by Kody's grand entrance, with Robyn trailing behind wearing that perpetually wounded expression. For many people, that mental image alone is enough to prompt a firm no, thank you. Perhaps the most puzzling thing is how long it took anyone to decode the phrase, "I speak Kody." It was never a declaration of deep emotional understanding. It was an admission of control. Anyone familiar with narcissistic behavior recognized the translation instantly. I know which buttons to push. And Kody, always eager for admiration, made himself remarkably easy to operate. His public persona has always been carefully constructed. Big statements, flashy symbols of success, and constant reminders of his wives, children, houses, and even watches. All of it functioned as stage props. Even his pride in his children often appeared only when he could take partial credit for their achievements. He once claimed ownership of 4 houses in Las Vegas, despite barely living in one and being largely absent from the rest. Kody loved the shock value of polygamy, but avoided most of the responsibility that came with it. Robyn, manipulative or not, recognized the situation for what it was: opportunity. She saw a man hungry for admiration and incredibly easy to guide. With minimal effort, she secured financial stability and influence, and the family paid the price. The twist, of course, is that Robyn eventually became the sole person responsible for managing the sprawling operation known as Kody Brown. What she may have imagined as a part-time role slowly turned into a full-time position. No benefits, no breaks, and no backup. The irony is hard to miss. The man who spent years loudly advertising his authority has quietly outsourced it for most of his adult life. The confidence was a costume. The reality underneath was far less commanding and far easier to control. That brings us to an uncomfortable but necessary truth about the family's financial struggles. This wasn't bad luck. It wasn't destiny. It was poor leadership. Plain and simple. The mystery of the Browns' early finances has often been treated like some great puzzle. In truth, it's not much of a mystery at all. 4 adults living in a 3-bedroom trailer, all supposedly working, yet always broke. That's not misfortune. That's an achievement in financial mismanagement. Under normal circumstances, a household with multiple working adults and no children should at least brush up against stability. Instead, this one seemed carefully designed to ensure constant scarcity. The income situation explains much of it. The self-appointed patriarch built his Wyoming career selling Book of Mormon educational videos, a market so narrow it barely qualifies as steady employment. To supplement that, there were part-time museum jobs, paper routes, and engraving work. None of these are known for supporting large families or long-term financial planning. The only truly stable paycheck came from the one wife holding a full-time state job. And, tellingly, that was the very job Kody wanted to uproot the moment he felt restless. Moving is expensive. Moving over and over again is financial self-sabotage. But stability was never his priority. What was a priority? Taste. Expensive taste. Flashy, dramatic, and completely unsustainable taste. The kind that puts a father in a sports car while his children get far too familiar with the texture of stale bread. This isn't about religion or culture. It's about everyday narcissism, the belief that one person deserves comfort and luxury while everyone else should simply make do. It's the same mindset you see in households where a man insists on weekly steak and potatoes dinners for himself, yet resents buying a single shared steak for his children. Different setting, same philosophy. Then there's fertility. Relentless, uninterrupted fertility. 13 children meant 13 rounds of unpaid maternity leave, each one pushing the family's already fragile finances further off balance. Any brief progress vanished the moment another pregnancy began. The children's well-documented disappointment at later pregnancies wasn't cruel or selfish. It was predictable. Every new baby stretched resources thinner and divided attention further. The timeline tells the story clearly. 3 years into the first marriage, a second wife arrives and becomes pregnant almost immediately. A third wife follows soon after, joining the family just before the first child is born. And she, too, becomes pregnant right away. 12 children in roughly 10 years. This wasn't a family plan. It was a financial demolition plan. The household never stabilized because stability was never part of the design. So, the real question isn't why they were broke. The real question is how they ever managed to be anything else. And if there was ever any doubt about who truly controlled the household, the moment Kody reported Solomon's phone placement said it all. The mythology of Kody's authority continues to collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. Every time the household slipped into what can only be called pandemic protocol theater, the same pattern played out. Kody positioned himself as the grand architect of an elaborate safety doctrine, while Robyn quietly served as the ever-present approval desk. The choreography was so consistent it bordered on farce. Take the moment when Kody dutifully reported Solomon for slipping a cell phone into his pocket, just in time for Robyn to swoop in and warn him about invisible bodily dangers. That single exchange stripped away any illusion of one-man rulemaking. Or consider the episodes where Kody paused mid-thought to ask Robyn whether the younger kids could attend a bonfire, or whether it was acceptable to stand near Meri, who, by his own admission, had been following the rules all along, while Robyn monitored the situation via FaceTime. The message was unmistakable. These rules did not originate with Kody's decisive leadership. They flowed directly from Robyn's ongoing commentary. The explanations offered for these supposed dangers only made the situation more surreal. The suggestion that carrying a phone close to the body could somehow threaten male reproductive health pushed the entire operation firmly into conspiracy territory. And this wasn't a one-off idea. Christine has confirmed that both Kody and Robyn shared conspiracy-style videos during the pandemic, privately indulging in that content while publicly pretending skepticism. It fit neatly into a broader world of QAnon-adjacent paranoia and online manosphere, thinking that they both seemed surprisingly comfortable entertaining. While the adults played out their control drama, the real cost landed squarely on the children. It's easy to imagine classmates witnessing Solomon's carefully managed mornings, the phone checks, the exaggerated hair combing rituals, the staged parental send-offs, and quietly collecting enough material to fuel years of teasing. There's nothing humorous about a child being turned into a prop in his parents' ongoing struggle for narrative control. Then, there was the unforgettable scene at Meri's house. Kody stumbled through an explanation of why a nanny could freely come and go while his own children were kept at arm's length. Robyn's expression said everything before he even finished speaking. In that moment, even they seemed faintly aware that the excuses no longer resembled logic. Publicly, the story was that these rules were Kody's creation. Privately and visibly, the power dynamics told a very different story. And all the while, the couple who lectured most loudly about proper behavior were repeatedly spotted out in public without masks. In the end, the elaborate system of restrictions amounted to little more than a jointly maintained illusion, one that collapsed the moment its creators forgot to keep up appearances. Now, if you're trying to understand how a man could build an entire plural marriage around impressing his father rather than loving his wives, Kody Brown's marital history offers a revealing clue. It reads less like a spiritual calling and more like a decades-long performance review, staged almost entirely for the approval of his father, Win. Each choice among the original 3 wives appears carefully calibrated to earn paternal favor rather than genuine romantic connection. Meri, the first wife, was the safest possible entry point, being the daughter of one of Win's closest church friends. She offered instant legitimacy within the faith and an easy way for an ambitious young man to make his father glow with pride. It was the gold star on the chart marriage, symbolically important, emotionally thin, and ultimately unsustainable. Janelle, by contrast, brought something far more practical to the table: income and infrastructure. She helped turn the plural family into a functioning economic unit, and when her mother later married Win, her value in Kody's world quietly increased. Rumors that she was Win's favorite certainly didn't hurt. Janelle became the wife chosen for usefulness and proximity to paternal approval, an arrangement that looks strikingly strategic for someone supposedly guided by spiritual revelation. Christine's role completed the picture. As church royalty, she allowed Kody to prove he could manage 3 wives and cement his standing within the faith community. If Meri was the ceremonial entry and Janelle the financial backbone, Christine was the prestige hire, the one meant to impress the board. Her presence wasn't about intimacy so much as validation. Then came Robyn. She was the first wife chosen not for Win, not for appearances, not for status or income, but for Kody himself. After 2 decades of dutiful marriages that left him bored, restless, and perpetually dissatisfied, he embraced Robyn with the enthusiasm of a man convinced he had finally earned a reward. She entered his life at precisely the stage when a traditional monogamist might pursue an affair. Polygamy simply gave him a way to formalize it. The sports car energy was unmistakable. A midlife crisis romance elevated to marital status, complete with the certainty that he had finally discovered true love. The idea of Robyn as destiny begins to unravel when you look at the timing. Her arrival aligned perfectly with growing ambitions for fame, a television platform, and the fantasy of becoming the public face and savior of polygamy. The casting could not have been more convenient. A struggling single mother suddenly appears in Kody's orbit, encouraged to put herself out there, willing to drive long distances to integrate into his social circle. Meanwhile, the family itself was just ordinary enough that producers needed a hook. Enter the 4th wife storyline, complete with a woman seemingly eager for the role. Viewed chronologically, the pattern is hard to miss. Each wife served a purpose. Meri represented aspiration. Janelle provided structure. Christine offered legitimacy. Robyn delivered self-indulgence. Under this lens, The idea of a divine calling quietly dissolves, replaced by a far more familiar story of ambition, dissatisfaction, and perfectly timed reinvention. If the early marriages were about duty, Robyn was the moment Kody finally allowed himself desire, and then rewrote the narrative to call it destiny. Now, ask yourself this. Have you ever watched a family crumble under the weight of a father's ego? The ongoing estrangement between Kody Brown and most of his children has become deeply unsettling to witness. Watching Maddie attempt to shoulder responsibility for the consequences of his choices is a painful study in misplaced guilt. Her efforts to explain away his indifference reveal a hard truth. Adult children often keep reaching for the parent who keeps pulling away. Instead of holding him accountable, she searches for her own fault in a fracture he created. Every child outside Robyn's household can point to at least one moment when he undermined their mothers, quietly planting seeds of division and then acting shocked when the family he neglected failed to thrive. This distance didn't happen by accident. This is the bill his family continues to pay for the mothers who chose to leave. And, as is so often the case, the children are the ones left carrying the heaviest cost. You can almost count the therapy sessions it takes to unpack one simple, devastating question. Why doesn't my father want me? The answer isn't comfortable, but it isn't complicated either. Kody Brown was never equipped to lead the family he was so determined to build. Both Christine and Janelle have shared that he frequently complained they were holding him back from his dreams. That statement might sound baffling if it weren't so revealing. He wanted the image of a large, impressive plural family without the burden of actually leading one. The nearly 20-year gap before adding a fourth wife says more than words ever could. The vision was enormous. The follow-through was minimal. His business ventures followed the same pattern. One flashy, get-rich-quick idea after another dissolved into nothing. When he couldn't provide in the way he believed a patriarch should, he didn't rise to the challenge. Instead, he fractured the family and retreated to the one space where his ego remained protected. Robyn, always agreeable, offered a fresh start, free from history, accountability, or pushback. The divide that followed between her children and the rest of the family was no accident. It was calculated. By narrowing the definition of family to one wife and 5 children, Kody could suddenly reinvent himself as a devoted husband and attentive father. The remaining 13 children became optional, background figures he no longer felt obligated to engage with. It's striking how quickly basic domestic competence appeared once the scope of responsibility shrank. Helping with school routines, pitching in around the house, even cooking dinner. It was never that he couldn't be that kind of father. It was that he chose not to be that father for everyone. Janelle's observation that legalized polygamy would have forced him into child support obligations feels almost poetic. One can only imagine how quickly his sense of paternal duty might have resurfaced if abandonment carried legal consequences. Few things illustrate the emotional fallout more clearly than hearing Maddie refer to him not as dad, but simply as Kody. That word choice speaks volumes. It's not anger, it's resignation. The pattern is painfully consistent. If he wanted to show up, he would have. If he wanted to attend Isabel's surgery, he would have. If he wanted to see Garrison's home, check on Truly, or stay connected with any of his children, he could have. The list goes on because the excuse never changes. Blame becomes a convenient shield, one that protects him from responsibility, effort, or emotional risk. There's nothing subtle about the tragedy here. These children deserved far better than a father who treated presence as optional and abandonment as routine. The wives deserved better than being blamed for failures that weren't theirs, and no amount of ongoing victimhood can obscure what's been clear for a long time now. This is a man whose selfishness ultimately outweighed even the size of the family he once claimed to treasure. Now, if you've ever wondered why certain reality stars insist on oversharing things absolutely no one asked to hear, the Browns recently provided a case study. Few reality television moments have managed to hit the trifecta of awkward, tone-deaf, and deeply uncomfortable, quite like Kody and Robyn's latest on-camera flirtation. Their strained winks and not-so-subtle remarks felt less like entertainment and more like a message aimed squarely at the ex-wives. Yes, they're still a couple. And no, Robyn isn't the modest figure she spent years portraying. All of this feels especially rich when you remember the strict purity culture once imposed on Robyn's own children. Kids who might have been reprimanded for something as harmless as an innocent kiss. Apparently, scandal only becomes acceptable when it's performed by the family's reigning romantic duo. That double standard alone is enough to make your head tilt. The spectacle might have been tolerable if it had stopped there. But Kody, ever eager to push the moment further, casually added that he would consider taking another wife purely for the sexual benefits, he clarified. One can practically picture network executives leaning forward in their chairs, imagining a fresh season built around a dating storyline, while fame-hungry hopefuls quietly line up off camera. The production crew, forced to witness this conversational derailment firsthand, truly deserved hazard pay. As if the innuendo hadn't already crossed the line, Jen's additional bob and boob joke landed like a final gut punch, prompting genuine physical recoil. Yet the most grating element wasn't the oversharing itself. It was Robyn's relentless, unquestioning laughter at every word that fell from Kody's mouth. This is the environment that keeps his ego well-fed. A carefully cultivated circle of agreement where every impulsive thought is met with approval. Whether Robyn was ever genuinely in love with Kody is open to debate. What's far more obvious now is the absence of any visible spark. In its place sits a kind of performative loyalty, one that props up his self-image while quietly draining the dignity from every scene they share. Which brings us to why comparing Kody to Jim Carrey is, frankly, generous. He's drifting far closer to The Shining than slapstick comedy. In a recent episode preview, Kody delivered what may be one of his most memorable lines yet. Robyn would never let me do anything naughty, as bad as I want to. The words were paired with an exaggerated set of facial contortions that felt lifted straight from a Jim Carrey audition tape. Unfortunately, the end result resembled Jack Nicholson roaming the halls of the Overlook Hotel far more than any lighthearted comedy. The moment was equal parts strange and unsettling. It did nothing to dispel the growing sense that this is a man increasingly adrift, emotionally, spiritually, and otherwise. Instead, it reinforced a dynamic viewers have watched unfold for years, Robyn presiding with quiet authority, and Kody following along obediently. His insistence that she restrains his naughty impulses sounded less like admiration and more like carefully crafted public relations. A flattering story, designed for viewers. A more realistic interpretation is far less noble. Without legal constraints, one could easily imagine the two of them skipping off together with whatever financial advantage could be wrung from the other wives, bags metaphorically slung over their shoulders like opportunistic holiday shoppers. Seen this way, his comment reads as a late attempt to rebrand himself as the reluctant party, supposedly held back only by Robyn's moral vigilance. Even the visual details undercut the effort. His new teeth, unnaturally bright and mismatched with the seriousness of the moment, only heightened the sense that something wasn't quite right. The cumulative impression is hard to ignore. Something here is deeply off. And that comment about naughty behavior may have been a thinly veiled nod to the ongoing maneuvering around Coyote Pass and the property decisions that conveniently left Janelle and Meri at a disadvantage. The idea that Robyn alone stands between Kody and further unfairness stretches credibility to its breaking point.